Hello health champions! Today we're going to talk about OMAD versus 2MAD. Eating 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day. Is one better, or does it just depend on the person and the circumstances? So today we're going to cover all the different factors that you need to understand so that you can decide when and if one is better for you. Coming right up. Hey, I'm Dr. Ekberg. I'm a holistic doctor and a former Olympic decathlete. And if you want to truly master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything. OMAD and 2MAD are both forms of intermittent fasting. And just real quick, if you eat 2 meals a day, and let's say that you eat lunch at noon and you eat dinner at 8, then you have an 8-hour feeding window. There's 8 hours during the day that you're eating, and there's 16 hours a day that you're not eating. If you squeeze that together a little bit, so you're eating lunch at noon and dinner at 6, now you have an 18-6 intermittent fasting pattern. If you squeeze it a little bit further, so you have lunch at 2 and dinner at 6, now you have a 20-hour fasting window and a 24 intermittent fasting pattern. And now if you squeeze that just a little bit further, then you have 1 meal a day where you're eating only 1 meal. You're eating all the food of that day in about an hour window or so. So they're really kind of similar, but they're different degrees of intermittent fasting. So you're stretching your fasting window from 16 to almost 24 hours. Now, why would someone want to do this, and what are the advantages and issues? Well, most people who get into intermittent fasting or ketogenic diet and so forth, then it's because they want to lose weight. Okay? It's by far the greatest and biggest reason for most people. And even though I totally understand that, I'm not a big fan of putting that as the priority, because we have to understand that the weight is not the root cause. There is a reason for the weight gain. There's a reason the weight won't come off, and we have to find and solve that reason, and that's the priority. And when we do that, then the weight comes off easy, or at least consistently, and we're addressing the root cause, so we're getting some health benefit. We're fixing the body at the root and we're getting healthier. The biggest reason for weight gain is insulin resistance. And the far gone state of insulin resistance is called type 2 diabetes. So that's the second biggest reason that people want to do intermittent fasting or low carb, is to reduce insulin resistance. If they are maybe pre-diabetic, they have what's called insulin resistance, or if they're full-blown type 2 diabetics. But we want to realize that the weight loss, the vast majority of people who have excess weight, the reason is that they are insulin resistant, and that is the thing that you're actually trying to resolve. For some people, it might be that they want to do OMAD or 2MAD to maintain the gains that they've made. They were overweight and they've lost the weight and now they want to maintain it. Or it might be someone who was never overweight but wants to maintain their health and not become insulin resistant or diabetic. And that's the best place to be, to fix things before they become a problem. There's the popular saying, don't fix it if it ain't broke. And I totally disagree with that, because what that says in a health sense is that wait for a disease before you do something, and that's not prevention. Okay? We want to prevent things. We want to maintain the highest possible level of health. Now, for some people, they don't really have a weight issue or a insulin resistance issue, but they're still interested in intermittent fasting because they're interested in longevity and improved immunity. And both of those are results of something called autophagy. Autophagy is when the body upregulates its recycling. When resources become more scarce in the body, such as when you're not eating, the body gets better at using them efficiently. So it starts recycling and reusing, and it gets more efficient at using and repairing what's there. So as a result, your immune system starts working better because some of those foreign things, some of those proteins that it's recycling are pathogens like virus and bacteria and yeast and parasites. And it's well documented that fasting and calorie restriction increases longevity. So we'll talk more about that. And some people do it just to save time. They have solved their health issues, they maintain what they're doing, they're getting some autophagy, they know that. But one of the greatest benefits is that they wake up in the morning and it's liberating that the first thing they do is not to have to go and eat. They can start their day, just shower, get dressed, and get right to it. And then they'll eat later in the day sometime, but it's not urgent. Okay, they could eat at noon, they could eat at 2 o'clock, they could eat at 6 o'clock. It's not a big deal. And that's a great thing to get to that point. And then there's the issue of calorie restriction. So it is a physical fact. It's a law of physics that you have to burn more calories than you put in. But in terms of physiology, it's not quite that simple because hormones determine how hungry we are, which determines how much we eat and so forth. And when we talk about calorie restriction, typically people talk about eating many small meals, but smaller meals with fewer calories in each meal. And they try to have frequent snacks, but they want to keep them under 100 calories. And that's a really bad idea because what people find is that it is much, much harder to eat a little bit frequently than to eat a lot on a few occasions. Because once you eat a little bit all the time, you trigger the body's desire for food. And that's why the typical idea of calorie restriction is so hard to maintain, whereas calorie restriction that results naturally from eating fewer meals is very, very easy. If you just skip a meal, the body says, oh, I'm hungry, and then you have a cup of tea, and the body says, okay, well, I'm good for now. This may be hard to believe if you haven't tried it, but talk to some people who have tried it or give it a try yourself, and you will find that once you get into it, you get a little bit fat adapted, then it is very, very easy that you don't get hungry. Personally, it is, when I'm recording this, it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and all I've had today is a cup of coffee and a cup of tea. And I could eat, but I'm not particularly hungry. And I don't have any weight to lose, I don't have insulin resistance, but I like the time savings and I like the fact that I'm getting some autophagy. So when people get into OMAD or 2MAD, okay, it works great for most people, at least for a time. But then there may be some issues down the road. And some of these issues might be a plateau. A lot of people might find great benefits, they lose some weight, but then they hit a plateau and nothing happens. Other people might do this and they notice, hey, you know, I feel a little better, I'm not as hungry, but I haven't lost a single pound. Or some people lost their weight, they reached their goal, they want to maintain the autophagy and the fasting, they want to maintain the time savings, but they lose too much weight. They get thinner than they want to be, than they feel good with. Or some people might get digestive upsets when they try to eat all that food in one sitting. If they don't have a strong digestive system, then it can be difficult to digest that much food in one sitting. Because if you eat 1,000 calories per meal in 2 meals, then the body has to make a certain amount of hydrochloric acid and a certain amount of digestive enzymes to process that food. If you eat 2,000 calories in one sitting, the body has to make twice as much all at once. So you have to have a stronger digestion to get away with eating 1 meal a day. And some of that, of course, is just getting the body habituated, getting the body used to it. So if you do this on a gradual pattern, then you can probably work up to it. Another issue that is not so common if you do it right is that you get too hungry. For the most part, that's because you try to do things too quick. If you ease into it, then there typically will not be a problem. If you go slow enough to get your body fat adapted, to teach your body how to use fat as the primary fuel instead of carbohydrates where you have to top it off all the time, you typically won't get hungry. But for some people, it's still an issue. Or for some people, they're losing weight or they're reversing insulin, their blood sugar going down, their insulin's going down, but for some reason they feel it's not happening fast enough, that they feel that there's a timeline and they want it to go faster. So now that we understand some of the variables and some of the issues that we're working with, let's try to understand the physiology a little bit closer. Like, what's the main difference between 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day from an internal perspective? What's actually happening in the body? So if you eat 1 meal a day, and this is the 24 hours of the day, then this would be midnight, and this is noon, and this is midnight again. And we're just going to assume if you eat OMAD, you could eat your meal at any time during the day. But we're just going to assume that you work, you come home, and you have your one meal at 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, you go from a fasting state, you go from a place where your body has made a lot of ketones. It's in a good state of autophagy, at least if you're fat adapted. And then as you eat, you start packing in a lot of food all at once. You're going to go from that fasted state, from a state that promotes insulin sensitivity, to an insulin resistant state all at once. Okay, you eat a bunch of food, your body increases the insulin production in response to all that food because your body has to process it and the insulin has to take the nutrients out of the blood and into the cell. So even if you're not technically long-term insulin resistant, you are promoting insulin resistance in that state. You're in the fed state. You're in the storing state, all right? And there's nothing wrong with that. We obviously have to eat sometime. So that lasts for a few hours while the body is processing that food, and then the insulin drops, and after a few hours you return into a state where you're becoming more insulin sensitive. You're moving, the momentum goes from insulin resistance to insulin sensitivity. And here's the key with OMAD, with 1 meal a day, that once you get into that insulin sensitive place, and you don't put any more food in, the longer you go without putting any new food in, the more you're promoting insulin sensitivity. The more ketones you make, the more autophagy you get. And so this is the continuation of that graph. By midnight, we're a little bit into insulin sensitivity again. And then as long as we don't eat again, we wake up in the morning, we go to work, but because we don't eat, we keep increasing the autophagy and the insulin sensitivity. If we eat 2 meals a day, let's say that we're doing an 18-6 pattern, so we're eating at noon and we're eating at 6. Then the thing would be exactly the same except for the jump at noon. So we have 2 times where we get into insulin resistance. There's twice a day where we're breaking the momentum of moving toward insulin sensitivity instead of just 1. And what that does, other than giving us 2 times where we become a little insulin resistant, is it shortens the time that we are without food, and therefore we don't get the same depth, we don't get the same momentum toward insulin sensitivity. We don't give the body the same opportunity to burn off stored resources because we eat sooner. And therefore we don't get the depth of insulin sensitivity that we would with a longer fast. So insulin sensitivity is a big thing, that the longer you go, the more insulin sensitive you become. The other thing is autophagy, that if you're looking for autophagy, there is no exact consensus of when that kicks in. We do know that if you're on a low-carb, high-fat diet, if you're already making ketones when you start the fast here just before midnight, then you'll probably have a significant amount of autophagy in about 14 to 16 hours. Definitely by 18 hours you'll have some good autophagy, but it's a matter of degrees. All right, the longer you go, the more you get. It's not like you never have any, but those extra 6 hours will dramatically increase the amount of autophagy that you enjoy. So with that in mind, let's just look at who might benefit from what and when. So OMAD would be the best way to go if you want faster results, right? If you're trying to lose weight faster, if you want to reverse type 2 diabetes faster, then go OMAD. If you want more autophagy, if your main concern is longevity, immune benefits, then you would want to go OMAD because OMAD is dramatically better for autophagy than 2MAD would be. OMAD, however, is harder to sustain. Some people do get hungry, some people lose too much weight, some people have digestive upsets, some people find it difficult to eat that much food in such a short period of time. So therefore it's harder to sustain. Some people get excess weight loss. And just in terms of long-term health, that once you have lost the weight that you want to lose, you want to maintain, now what you're looking for is health. And your body is going to require a certain amount of nutrients. You need vitamins and minerals and essential amino acids and essential fatty acids. So the amount of food that you have to eat to provide those nutrients, it's much more difficult to eat that in a single meal than it is in 2 meals. And then 2 meals a day is easier to sustain for all of the same reasons. You don't get quite as hungry, it's easier to maintain the weight, it's easier to get the nutrients. But of course, the drawback is that you don't get as fast a result and you don't get the same depth of autophagy that you would with OMAD. And for some people who want an even stronger degree of fast results or more autophagy, maybe they have cancer, maybe they have an autoimmune disease, maybe they have a really stubborn weight or type 2 diabetes, then they might want to go longer than 24 hours in a fast. They might want to go 36 hours or 48 hours, or they might want to do 3-day fast or 4-day fast, and not all the time, not like every week, but you want to change things up a lot and throw those in once in a while. Again, that's why we want to understand these principles, because there is not one set perfect way to do it for every person. It's going to depend on a lot of different factors. So you want to understand this stuff so that you can start playing around with it and understand why things are happening and then find the way that works for you. So now what do you do with this? Well, it depends on where you are. So let's just figure out where you are on this scale. If you're eating 3 or more meals a day, then your first step would be to get fat adapted. If you're eating 3 meals plus snacks, you are probably carbohydrate dependent, because carbohydrate dependence is the only reason that you would want to top off your blood sugar with a snack every couple of hours. If your body knows how to burn fat, you're not going to need to eat that often. So that would be step 1. You go from eating all those meals high carb to eating low carb. You get your body fat adapted, you're not going to need the snacks, you're down to 3 meals a day. Then once your body gets used to that, you try skipping breakfast, or at least you try to push breakfast later in the day and just get your body used to that idea. Before you know it, you can skip breakfast altogether and you're eating 2 meals a day. Now, from 2 meals, you start shrinking, you start pushing the 2 meals closer together. So if they're 8 hours apart in the beginning, you push them 7, 6, 5, 4 hours until you're all the way down to OMAD, if that suits your goals, right? If you don't feel like you need autophagy and you don't have weight to lose, you just want the time saving, then maybe 16/8 is good for you. So again, you figure out where this fits for you. And then the way I see it is that for most people, you're going to stay primarily in OMAD until you have reached your goals, until you've lost your weight, you've reversed the insulin resistance, you've reversed the type 2 diabetes, then you stay in OMAD. And then, for all the reasons we talked about, once you have reached your goal, you're insulin sensitive, you've reached your goal weight, now it's going to depend. Some people are going to be perfectly able to stay on one meal a day, and they're not going to lose a lot of weight. They're going to be easy for them to maintain it there, and they find it easy to get all their nutrients in one meal. Great. But if you start losing too much, and you don't want to lose too much. Now, I don't think there's anything unhealthy with being very thin unless you start getting emaciated and pathologically thin and malnourished. But on the contrary, being quite thin probably gives you some longevity benefits, even though I think you can get most of those benefits by following these principles and just being in enough autophagy on a regular basis. But if you're starting to lose too much weight, or if you just want to enjoy 2 meals a day, then now you're going to move back. So you went from 2 meals a day to 1 meal a day. And this 1 meal a day is kind of crunch time. That's where you get things done. But when things are done, now you go back to 2 meals a day, or maybe alternate 2 meals with 1 meal to get the autophagy benefits. And that's where I would stay for the rest of my life. I would stay with 2MAD or OMAD. I would throw in some longer fasts every couple of months, twice a year, whatever fits you, because there's tremendous amount of research that shows that you get enormous health benefits, that it is much, much more important when you eat even than what you eat. Of course, you have to eat real food. That goes without saying. But when you eat is incredibly important, and there's some tremendous health benefits to giving yourself a sustained period without food. The cleanup, the autophagy, the insulin resistance, your body is designed for this. You eat something, you put it in storage. During the fasting, you pull it out of storage. That's how the body stays in balance, and it allows the body to clean itself up so you can stay healthy for the long term. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out that one. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.